Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to Health Oddity podcast. We're here with another great episode. It's been a while since I've introduced everyone, so I'm going to keep it brief because I usually make mistakes. Luckily, this is the first take. Anyway, so James, how are you? No one ever asks you, so I thought, how are you doing?
I'm exceptionally good, thank you. The weather is fantastic. I've had a busy morning. I've got a nice busy afternoon, but it's everything's good, thank you.
Great. Well, that's excellent. What about you, Peter?
I'm doing exceptionally well as it happens because the weather's good and all that. So isn't it amazing? There's a bit of a coincidence there. And I spent the weekend in Devon with Sean and the boy, picking up stones and stuff. It's amazing how different beaches look now compared to what they used to look like after meeting David Keown and seeing that big stones are really good things.
So basically you go looking at stones that you could pick up, or I could pick that one up.
Yeah. There's millions of them as well.
It must be like when people do parkour, they must just look at like civic centres and car parks.
Yeah.
And go, I could do a backflip off that.
Sean started to roll her eyes every time we go out now because like we were walking along a cliff path and there was a beach down there and we had to go like walk down and back up. So I was like, fancy just wandering onto that beach and having a look around. And she was like, yeah, okay. And she didn't twig. And then I just like went around looking at stones, which ones to pick up. And she was like, oh dear. Oh dear.
I've lost him. Kilos?
Sorry?
Were they 115 kilos?
I've no idea.
No.
I don't know.
I still don't know how he quite weighs them. He seems to know their weight.
He probably takes like a belt and a strap and one of those things you weigh your luggage or some kind of. He must have some way of doing it, mustn't he?
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. I don't know. I just pick it up and go, that was quite heavy.
Yeah.
that was heavy enough. That was heavy enough.
Yeah. You don't need to know. You don't need to know, do you?
No. Well, I'm fine. Thanks for asking, guys. Yeah. Well, usually I have to follow some awkward silence after Peter speaks, but this time it was quite.
Yeah, no, I kept it clean for you.
You kept it clean for me. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. Well, on this jovial note, I'm going to say hello to Britt. Thanks for coming on, Britt. Please say hello to our listeners.
Hello, everyone, and good morning on my end of the world. But I suppose we're looking at evening for you guys.
We're kind of middle of the afternoon. We're 2:45 in the afternoon here. Yeah. So.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So we got Britt Ringstrom on as a guest today, and now I've spoken to Britt probably a couple of years ago. We had a mutual acquaintance that I put in touch with Britt, and she helped them greatly, giving tons of advice and also being a really, really caring ear for that person. And so when I had the opportunity to invite her on, I was really excited because in the time that it's been since we last spoke, I've got loads of questions on the topics we're going to discuss, and I think it's going to be a fascinating insight from not only Britt's experience just generally in the health and fitness world, but also the implications of life-changing diagnoses in terms of your health and how you can really overcome that and become the best version of yourself at any time. So Britt, what I wanted to do is just find out for our listeners who may never have come across your story and also who you are and what you do, just a little bit of a background, and then we can just have a great chat about some of the ideas that you've had. And I've looked at some of your TEDx talks, and I know that you're really active on Instagram and things like that. So why don't you give us a quick kind of background into who you are and what you do currently, and then we can get into your backstory.
Well, I would say I've kind of have about I've been in this industry for about 18, 19 years, health and wellness, preventative care, lifestyle, lifestyle restructuring, if you will. I was a strength and conditioning coach out of the gates. And the biggest inspiration for that for me is pulling myself out of some extreme pain and an inflammatory disease that is rheumatoid arthritis. So from there, that encouraged me to really get deep into the world of health and fitness and wellness. So was a trainer for a long time for Lifetime Fitness, then went independent, opened a gym, a CrossFit gym. Had that for about 8 years, sold my shares. I still teach there, but I do a little more of a broader spectrum. So coaching to one-on-one training to just virtual lifestyle coaching, excuse me. And then I also happen to do real estate. So I kind of get people into that entire health and homes realm of overall life. So that's kind of my little spiel as far as what I do work-wise, but it's kind of a constant study and research on how can we better care for ourselves? What can we do to extend our lives, but also enjoy them even more? Because I think reality of it is we're thrown so many factors, whether it's environmental, whether it's genetic, whether it's a mental state someone could be in. There's so many variables thrown at us, and it leaves people with a lot of questions of how do we tackle this big project that is self, not just physically, not just mentally, but from a preventative standpoint, especially. So that's been a big passion of mine quite a long time, honestly, probably since I was about 15, 16 years old. I started going to the gym with my dad and just having a high passion for this. So yeah.
I remember you talked about on one of your TEDx talks that you were a really active kid and you were competing in pretty tough sports. Was it hockey? Did I hear that? Was that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And obviously you have you competed in CrossFit Games yourself?
So I did I went up to CrossFit regionals levels for a couple years, individual and with team. So grew up playing hockey, ran track in college, and then went on and did powerlifting. Powerlifting turned into CrossFit competing. So I did that with CrossFit for a while. Then I ended up procuring that into the Grid League. So National Pro Grid League, which is essentially a series of states that all compete against one another in a co-ed league, if you will. That was super fun. And then from there, I went into more Olympic weightlifting, a little kind of crossover there, and eventually decided I think I'm tapped out and competing.
Well, the thing is that
that's pretty much everything though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is.
The reason I asked that is because when I first came across you, it was for a TEDx talk on YouTube called Managing Rheumatoid Arthritis and All Aspects of Health. It was a fascinating talk, and you talked about so many different areas of well-being, but you've achieved a huge amount in terms of your own health. But what brought you to do that TEDx talk? What was the motivating factor? And because I think our listeners would be really interested to know what was in that talk and why it was relevant to you.
Sure. Well, I would say, we're all thrown something that we have to learn how to work with, deal with, try to understand, try to solve. And for me, one of those big factors was the level of pain that I happened to be going through. And that was when I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis when I was about 20 years of age. So that ended up slowing me down, limiting me on a lot of factors, down to mental state, physical state, ability to do everyday movement, and feeling like I was 97 years of age. And I just decided I'm not going to just roll over and take it. I'm going to actually try to learn something and solve this problem, because at the end of the day, everything is simply a math problem, and there's a solution to every problem. Therefore, let's just call it a math problem. So with that said, I began just kind of studying and trying to understand alternative approaches of medicine. My doctor at the time, my rheumatologist, she was very crippled, wheelchair bound. She is no longer with us. She had passed away. Apparently with the arthritis kind of taking over her body. Well, that was one of the drivers for me. It's like, I don't want this to become my life. I don't want to have to rely solely on these pharmaceutical drugs to keep me alive, if you will, and my organs functioning properly and my ability to move. So I started to study more of the natural approach to medicine and preventative care, anti-inflammatory care, and in tune with that as well, a lot of lifting and structured programming around that. So then I had someone approach me one day, the TED group reached out and asked if I would do a talk and share my story. So from there, it kind of rolled out as what I do from a nutritional standpoint, what I've learned, what I've done trial and error with a multitude of times over and over again, whether it's nutritional, emotional, meditative, hot, cold therapy, acupuncture, yoga, flow, mobility, strength conditioning. And my TED talk it was one of the more fun experiences I've ever been a part of. It's funny though, when you look back at them, because it's probably like 10 years old at this point, you always want to do it over again. There's more information you want to spit out. To me, I see it as it's dated now, but it's really not. So, yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating because as a personal trainer, you do come across very many inflammatory conditions. And rheumatoid arthritis, or RA, is an inflammatory disease, isn't it? And it's not like a typical arthritis, which would be wear and tear or osteoarthritis and things like that. It is the body attacking itself, and I think one of the things, particularly when I'm starting to talk to a client who comes in with an inflammatory illness and one that's immune based, there's a huge amount of just there's just questions and questions and questions, because there's very little knowledge, and sometimes there seems to be very little rhyme or reason, because you were incredibly active. You were very young when you were in your late teens when you were diagnosed, if I'm correct.
Yes, I was 20 years of age when I was technically diagnosed. Symptoms started probably around 18. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what's so interesting about you is that you, it's almost like the traditional thought and the traditional kind of path that the kind of medical establishment kind of push people down, you were not interested in. I mean, what was it in you that made you question the way your path could be? What is it? I mean, other than seeing, that lady who was greatly affected by it, what is it in you that kind of pushes you to inquire about a better route?
I think with every issue, with every problem, it stems from something, whether that be, it's easy to say it's genetic. It's easy to say, oh, I want to find the root cause of it. And for me, the pharmaceutical approach seemed like a Band-Aid. It seemed like, well, this is just going to slow the damage. This is going to slow the inflammatory response. It's not going to stop it. It's not going to reverse the damage that's already been done. And it's a temporary solution, and the risks do not outweigh the benefits, in my opinion. And I don't want to be an experiment of like, well, let's try this and see how this works, when it's something that could potentially be so invasive to so many parts of your body from a function standpoint, whether it's your internal organs, whether it's your DNA, just your body in general responding to it. And alongside that, I was, a broke college student, and seeing the expense of it and knowing, I'm not going to be under my parents' wing forever. This is very expensive. You look at the average cost of a biologic, which is the kind of standard go-to. So let's just say for the audience, when you're diagnosed with an inflammatory disease like this, common practice, I will not ever claim to be a nurse or doctor, but common practice in that medical world is they have to give you methotrexate first, which is a very inexpensive drug, very hard on the liver. I'm still not really understanding the full chemical breakdown of it, meaning I don't see the purpose of this. So they put you on that first initially because insurance companies require it.
It's a chemotherapy drug, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And when it's a requirement for insurance, to me, that tells you right away it's not for the right reasons. That's just a numbers game. And I'm a human being. I don't need to play with numbers with my body and what happens to it. The next step is then they typically put you on a biologic, which is essentially something that's sitting in a lab for years upon years as they're developing that. And that's going to essentially create a different response in your body. And so I went on that, and that's on average about $4,800 a month for 2 injections. That's 4,800, US dollars. That's a lot of money. Now, to expect anyone to be able to afford something like that also is not a guarantee. It's essentially a buffer for a period of time for you to not be in pain. It's not a long-term solution, in my opinion. And so that was another big push for me. Like, there's got to be another way, because we've been practicing medicine since the beginning of time. And you look at where medicine was at one point to where medicine is now is very different. And I just firmly believe there has to be less invasive and more proactive ways of caring for oneself, especially when it comes to mitigating an inflammatory response, such as rheumatoid arthritis. You know, the inflammatory diseases, they're endless. There's so many of them, right? Rheumatoid arthritis happens to be one that's it's not fun. It's very invasive. It's very damaging. It's considered a chronic disease because of the magnitude of damage it can do to not just the joints, but the internal organs. So it's something to take seriously, not lightly. And with that said, why not get to the root cause of it and find more natural approaches that we can take control of ourselves, such as, you know, and that's what we can get into, you know, different approaches of just the day-to-day of what people can do to decrease levels of inflammation, but also to dig to the root cause of the problem. Sorry, that was a long tangent.
No, that's absolutely fascinating. No, I mean, what happened when did you discuss some of the things, some of the approaches that you were going to take with your physicians, and what was their take on some of your solutions? Because you came at it from your own angle, which wasn't the medicalized angle. It was very much kind of like, how can I support my body? What was the general kind of, did you get any feedback at all on what you were doing?
I think I got kind of the confused dog head tilt. You know, when a dog tilts its head to the side and looks confused at you, that was kind of a common response. Like, well, why won't you just take this drug? Why won't you just try this first? And so I started to ask them, and I ask a lot of questions. I think that's a great way to learn and a great way to have conversation, and, you know, for human beings to tap into their brains a little bit more. And the questions I guess they didn't always like. So after that one doctor, she had passed, I switched on to a new doctor, and he I think I asked him about, you know, the physical lifestyle of just lifting, you know, actual weights, doing strength trainings to create more support around your joints. And that was very new age for him. He's like, well, I don't know if that's going to work. I've not ever heard of that, which is weird to me. Like, how is that not a discussion had with physicians to their patients of, hey, before we put you on this medication, let's discuss what your day-to-day looks like. What is your lifestyle like? And where can we potentially make some either changes or additions, such as, you know, things in your control that are very inexpensive. You know, doing some yoga, doing some flow work, getting vitamin D in the morning, going for walks, you know, changing up your diet, removing inflammatory foods from your system. Those aren't conversations had, and they're not conversations that I think I've now, in my 18 years of having this, I've had 4 different physicians, rheumatologists, and not one of them has really made that a prevalent point of conversation of, well, let's talk about your lifestyle. The most recent one. What's that?
I was just going to say, you sort of touched on the, you know, the history of medicine and where we are today with it. And I think, if anything, over the last couple of years, I know in America, obviously, it's far more open that really sort of medicine and healthcare and big pharma is a business, and it's there to generate profit and income and things. In the last couple of years in the UK with COVID and everything, we've become more aware of, you know, I suppose that the business of medicine and the business of healthcare or sick care, whatever you want to call it. And I suppose the way you're talking about these lifestyle interventions and things that can be low cost and can really have a big impact on people's lives, they don't generate profit. They don't, you know, most people, like you said, would rather turn up at a doctor and be given a pill or an injection and kind of sit back and be a passive person within the transaction, isn't it? I'll come to you, give me something to heal me, I'll go away, rather than you went saying, well, what can I do? What can I do with my lifestyle? And I can imagine that the number of people who actually go to a doctor and approach it from that perspective is percentage wise is probably minuscule, which is why most of the doctors kind of gave you that slightly confused look, as in, we'll just take the tablet or just take the injection and stop asking so many questions.
Boris Johnson say that about the second jab, said it's much easier to take the second jab rather than lose weight.
Something.
Yep.
We'll avoid.
We won't go into politics.
We'll
away from that. We know what happens when we go there.
No, you're good. Take this easy route, and I think that mentality. Where did that start? Where we become almost. I don't even like to use the word lazy, but when I'll use the word lazy, is behind the word intellectual. So we have some people has society become intellectually lazy? And I think now obviously people are definitely really starting to open themselves up, their minds, to a lot more and alternative approaches. But for a period of time there, it's almost like so much of society became very reliant on that, just, okay, take this, do this, and you're safe, versus, hey guys, let's stop being intellectually lazy, start thinking for ourselves, and go back to our grassroots of how we've been taking care of ourselves back in a very, very, very earlier time. If we think ancestrally, I mean, there's been effective medicine for thousands of years, but I think it's been covered up, and we should be exposing that to people so they can really start to take the initiative around their health and take responsibility for their level of, or for the care and how they want to feel. And it doesn't have to come from just taking a pill, because that seems like the safer route, and just cover up our eyes.
It's really hard though, isn't it, to try and figure out how to think about that, because say with RA, you can do something about it with like anti-inflammatory foods and stuff like that, and there'll be different reactions to different things for different people. But then you get something like cancer, say, where you do need to do something about it, like now, otherwise it's going to get worse. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I'll make sense here, but that's going to get worse and that's going to kill you very quickly. Whereas RA might be like develop over time. So you've got a little bit of more time to research it and look at it and not have such invasive treatment, if you will. And then it's up to the individual to take that responsibility, isn't it? I suppose at the moment it is, as opposed to society saying, right, we're going to approach that. Because if you try and do that with absolutely everything, there's just not enough time in the world for physicians, for every physician.
It's a challenge, isn't it? A challenge, the difference. You know, there's acute health and then there's chronic health. And chronic health is a challenge, isn't it? Because it's something that's ongoing. You know, I mean, we all know people who've suffered from things like cancer and stuff like that, and you do have to act extremely quickly. And there is always medical intervention, and things can change day to day. With chronic disease, it's a very different mindset, and it's a very different approach, and it's very hard to navigate because, as you were saying, Britt, sometimes you feel great, and then sometimes you feel, you know, you go through flare-ups and things like that, and navigating it can be the journey can be very up and down, can't it? And over long periods of time. And you've been managing this for 18 years. So how's your mindset developed over the last 18 years of living with this?
I think that a lot of us are survivors more than we realize we are. And we're on this planet to be able to fight through some heavy shit. And everyone's got something that they're going through. Everybody does. How big or small that is, that's okay. And I just think that everything is in front of us to teach us something. And that's why I'll forever be so involved in this and curious and wanting to learn more and wanting to find more answers. Is what else am I doing? You know what I mean? I would rather be someone that's sure, a survivor, but also an educator, someone that can help other individuals and pass this along to them. Spread that word, not from a standpoint. I don't see this as like, well, this is a moneymaker for me, let me really tap in. I don't see it like that at all. I see it as, sure, we have our jobs, we have how we pay our bills and support ourselves financially. But I think we also have a duty, and that's to, whether that's to help others, whether that's to teach, whether that's to spread some form of a message to some degree. And I'd like to share information that I'm passionate about, but that I believe in. And with that, I think it takes putting myself through it, like trial and error. Okay, well, here's something that could potentially work, and it's historically worked thousands of years ago. Why not try it on myself? And then I can speak better to it. So even if it's not fully related to rheumatoid arthritis, an example, right? It's something that could help a dramatic amount of individuals if they were to just tweak and alter, because everyone's got some different situation scenario that they're dealing with, whether it's physically, whether it's emotionally, whatever that may be.
So where are you now? Sorry, go on, James.
I was just going to say, towards the start of the conversation, you kind of touched on, I suppose, the difference between lifespan and health span, you know, and preventative kind of care and looking after yourself, even when apparently things are good, you know, to prevent these things maybe coming up. What kind of, you did kind of mention a number of things, but I'm just thinking a lot of my members that I work with are in their 50s and their 60s and their 70s. What would you say are some really good practices that really are universal, that are gonna you know, pay dividend to people? We spoke about this a few weeks ago, I think with Kelly Manzoni, where we said that what you do in your 30s is kind of setting you up for life in your 40s, and what you do in your 40s is setting you up for the 50s, and you're kind of always looking a decade ahead and trying to give yourself the best opportunity to be in the best kind of shape as you can be when you get to the next decade. What kind of practices would you recommend for preventative care and increased quality of life and increased health span and that sort of thing?
You know, I think
question, I know, but
no, that's okay. But at the same time, sure, it's a big question, but it's a legitimate question. And I think where people will get stuck is they get overwhelmed. There's so much information out there. Okay. Look at the time we're living in right now, Instagram, Twitter, you name it. There's so much information, and everyone's a health expert now. It's too much for some people, where they're like, I don't even know where to begin or how to organize this. The best advice I feel like you could start with is map out your day, map out an example day, whether it's you take 1 weekday, you take 1 weekend, and how do you go about every single thing throughout your day on a, let's just say it was planned, right? Okay, well, you're going to wake up in the morning, wake up with the sun to set your circadian rhythms. You're going to get some sunlight first thing in the morning. You are going to take some deep breaths. Maybe you do your Wim Hof breath work as part of your routine. That's okay. You're essentially creating a routine where all these habits are put into place, and overall, they're going to help you for the next, not just week, not month, year, 5, 10, 40 years down the road, but you're also teaching those habits to those around you. And so you're just kind of trickling, it's a trickle effect, right? But start with that daily schedule. And it's the simple things. Get your vitamin D first thing in the morning, wake up with the sun, get that on your retina, because of course that's going to set things from a biorhythm standpoint, which is going to affect your brain function. Let's just say cognitive issues. Okay. That's a big thing, especially as you get into those 50s, 60s, 70s. My dad, early onset dementia, and he's become my new study product is my dad. So you have to look at all these things that are thrown at you, and what can we do? Getting movement in right away, first thing in the morning, even if you go for a little 10-minute walk. If you have the accessibility, whether it's in your shower or a sauna or an ice bath, do some hot and cold therapy. And we can dive into all this stuff if you guys want. I'm just saying, what I mean by that is starting to create that regimented schedule into your everyday schedule, because then what's the next thing that people use an excuse? Time. I don't have that much time. That's okay. Incorporate these little patterns into your everyday schedule, and it just becomes part of your lifestyle. Eating a clean breakfast in the morning that doesn't have a shit ton of sugar, that doesn't have, a lot of processed foods, and maybe not having coffee the instant you roll out of bed, because what does that do? That elevates cortisol levels. It creates a stress response first thing in the morning, and it feeds into anxiety. There's so many factors played in. And I don't know how much you want me to dive into like a daily schedule, but
no, this is really good. I'm enjoying this. Continue.
So let's just say you wake up, you look at the sun. I usually go outside and I do a bunch of deep breaths. I'll do a little bit of meditation for my mental state. I'll make some ginger tea. So I do hot water with fresh squeezed lemon, Himalayan sea salt, sliced ginger, and I sip on that. I try to avoid having electronics crazy in the morning. I don't really listen to a super intense amount of stress or news in the morning. I listen to Jordan Peterson in the morning because it's something that taps into your brain, and it's a great mindset. Not just Jordan Peterson example, or Andrew Huberman, neurologist. You what?
The Health Oddity podcast in the morning.
The Health Oddity podcast, exactly. So listen to something that's bettering you, right? Or making you think a little bit more, versus, hey, let's just look at the insanity that is the world right now and stress ourselves out, become anxious, emotionally distraught, upset. That's not a way to start your day, because that affects things on a way deeper level than people realize. And then, make yourself some breakfast. Some people don't even cook their own food, and that is totally okay. Why not start today? So, improving your cooking skills, those are survival skills, right? So you're doing so many different pieces incorporated in. Okay. What are the vitamins you're taking? Are you getting your omegas in for the day that are great for an inflammatory response? I don't know how deep you guys want me to go into this, but, your food, what you're putting into your body is such a massive piece. You talk about cancer, so much of that can be driven from the things that we put in our mouth every day, or the environmental factors we're exposed to. So, thinking about the air that you're breathing, crack a window, get some fresh air into your lungs, taking a hot, cold shower. So if you don't have a sauna or an ice bath or access to that, totally fine. Do you have a shower? Great. Do some hot, cold intervals. So freezing cold water for 20 seconds, crank that heat up for 20 seconds, freezing cold for 20 seconds, scorching hot for 20 seconds. And within that, do your breath work, which is then teaching you to be able to push through that stress response of those extreme temperatures, and tapping into cardiovascular health, tapping into your inflammatory responses with the cold water, heating your internal system up with the hot water. So it's little practices that you start to incorporate as a part of your every single day routine. And for a lot of people, the best way you can do that is start writing it down. And I can write this down for you guys and send it to you if you want to share it with your listeners at some point. But okay, then the food's going to be a big factor. Maybe you don't get a ton of crazy starchy carbohydrates first thing in the morning. It all depends on, how you eat. But for me, I do a high amount of meat, more of a carnivore based diet in the morning, to keep inflammatory markers down.
What did you notice? What made you move to that? Because obviously there's going to be one of the things that people do when they've got chronic diseases is they are searching for solutions, and they will try loads of different things, and there's a lot of hope on them. What moved you more towards that animal-based diet as opposed to what many people would recommend, which is more vegetables, more kind of detoxing, etc.? What pushed you towards that mode of eating?
I think I like to refer back to a more of an ancestral based diet of kind of the hunt and gather. And again, everyone has a different response, and you have to see what works for your body is the biggest thing. Because I'll never point one, let's call it quote unquote, I hate the word diet, but I'll never tell someone to eat a particular way, but I will suggest remove inflammatory markers from your body through your diet, an example. So if you're eating a lot of processed foods or sugars, that's obviously going to create a massive response, inflammation in the gut. So, or getting enough fats into your system, and that can come from animal fats. It can come from, not seed oils, of course, but like avocado oil, coconut oil, things like that are going to be a little bit more nutrient dense and elevating those omegas. Fruits are fantastic, depending what types of fruits, right? So if you're trying to keep sugar levels down, avoiding bananas and pineapples, not avoiding, but moderation, because those are highest in the glycemic index. But if you don't have as many concerns from a blood sugar standpoint, you probably don't need to avoid those right now. And as far as carbohydrates, I do eat carbohydrates. I just stay away from things such as gluten. Okay. Gluten is a binding agent, and essentially that binding agent is going to make little shard cuts and tears into your intestinal tract, which then in turn from there is leaking those toxins into your bloodstream, if you will. So whether it's celiac or you just have high inflammatory markers, cutting out gluten and wheat products is never a bad thing. There's just not the nutritional value within that for you to say, I have to have gluten in my diet. So if there was, great. It just has not been found that there's any nutritional value to that. So instead, substituting it with something such as squash, something as sweet potatoes, purple potatoes. You could do white potatoes depending how your body digests them. Rice isn't a bad thing. So am I a strict 100% carnivore? No. I just do find that my body responds a lot better when I do a good volume of protein diversity, bison, beef, but quality beef, grass-fed beef, of course. Getting it directly from the farmer versus buying it at Costco or some mass-produced organization.
So you probably respond to a bit of carbohydrate from your training, because unlike a lot of people, you're very active, aren't you? So do you find that the carbohydrate just helps you feel good in this gym, or is it just something?
Carbohydrates definitely for fuel, for brain fuel, especially too, but more from a brain fuel standpoint, I find I feel the effects when I have a good amount of fats in my system. So whether it's animal fats, whether that's essential or a good amount of oils that I'm incorporating into my diet. But the carbohydrates for sure on a fuel standpoint, because I'll get foggy as ever if I don't have any carbohydrates at all. I just try to avoid the heavy carbohydrates such as bread and flour.
What's really interesting from Pete's mentioned this before, actually, everything that you've mentioned there, people do already. It's just doing what they already do slightly differently. So it doesn't actually take any more time. People already have a shower. So doing the hot and the cold stuff while you're in the shower is no different. People may already have a coffee, but having like a ginger type tea is exactly the same. And instead of, like you said, I don't watch the news or anything, but instead of people, maybe they get a cup of coffee and they sit and watch the news, get a cup of coffee and go and sit outside in some, fresh air and sun and things like that. They're already eating some kind of food, breakfast or later if they're intermittent fasting or whatever. It's just eating a slightly different type of food. It's all stuff you already do. It's not
the prime example I've got with that is something we were talking about before we even recorded, and Britt was saying it's been really cold where she is and all that, and the sun's out today and it's lovely. I train people outside. And where I am, I see in the summer, I see loads of people walking to work. In the winter, hardly anybody. And it's like, why? I mean, okay, if the weather's if it's raining and really horrible, fair enough. But, you still get nice days in winter. It's just a bit colder. You put more clothes on and you can still walk to work. But people don't. They only walk.
There's no such thing as bad weather, is there? It's just bad clothing.
Poor clothing, yeah. But
it comes down to... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's just like, what's the difference apart from the fact that it's a bit colder, so you put more clothes on, but people just don't do it in the winter, and it's like you still get sun, you'll get your bit more vitamin D, but you'll feel better by being outside anyway. And by the time you do get to work, you're not stressed from sitting in a traffic jam or something like that, And if you can walk, it's no further away in the winter than it is in the summer, is it? We have to retrain our brains and our bodies to get
comfortable being uncomfortable. And sometimes that means, oh my God, I may get wet on my walk to work today.
Yep.
Or it may be cold, so I'm going to wear some extra clothing, but I'm also going to see the benefits of it. Like, you have to start to see the benefits of every single thing that you're doing. And not that you have to be so methodical and get so deep in your head, like, oh, I wonder if I should take 4 steps. No, it just the simplicities of it and the benefits of it, such as walk to work. Not only is it great for your body physically and your heart health, but you're taking in actual fresh air. You're getting vitamin D on your body. You're challenging yourself with maybe some alternative weather that happens to surprise you, and maybe that's the cold. You're not going to die. Look at Wim Hof, an example. The guy walks basically naked in the Antarctic, and he's fine because he focuses on his breath, and you start to calm that automatic stress response. You start to calm that anxiety of like, oh my God, this is uncomfortable. What am I going to do? You're going to be just fine. You're going to be just fine, but your body needs that vitamin D. And so people need to be outside more in the winter, even if it's uncomfortable. And it's you add it on your routine. What's that?
That's say, because that just reminded me of like prehistoric times. I mean, we haven't always lived in houses. I mean, before we came on air, that sounds important, doesn't it? Before we press record on Zoom, we were talking about how old the houses are that we were having
a who lives in the oldest house competition.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I won. But before that, people didn't have access to central heating. They didn't have access to these things. So, it's not that people were different genetically. It's just that at some point they were more, I suppose their bodies were more robust in terms of what the world throws at them. And I suppose what you're doing is not, you're not superhuman. You're just reconnecting with the kind of
that's simple.
And what your body wants to heal, doesn't it? In many ways, I know that it's aberrant when there's an immune response, there's an aberrant behavior, but it's almost like an immune response is the body trying to solve a problem in which it doesn't really understand the problem, and it's confused in some way. And actually, what you're saying when you start talking about the brain is that we have a unique gift that other animals don't have. Is that we have the opportunity to stand back and look at it and analyze it, and that's certainly what you've done. In that situation, what would you say about that?
As far as the brain connection with it?
Yeah, the brain connection and just retapping into what your body actually holds in terms of its potential and its wellness potential.
Sure, I think our bodies are the human body is wildly miraculous, and it's capable of some pretty incredible shit. Sorry to swear. But people don't realize that. They don't tap into that, and they get overcomplicated with it, and therefore they avoid it. They just don't do it. And kind of like we say, map out your day, and you will see how simple it is. Because we just need to go back. We can't go back in time, right? But we can go back to the mentality of simpler times. And these are simple daily practices that everyone is capable of doing. And you have to trust that, and trust that your body is going to respond 9 times out of 10 very positively to it. But we've put ourselves in this little bubble, and we don't realize, hey, you actually can do this. Very, very, you're very capable of doing this, and the benefits of it are going to be so huge. And it's a simpler time. It's not so complicated, because there's so many gadgets out there and machines and systems that everyone can use. And that's great and cool, but go back to how we really originally started. An example of the house that you're living in that's very old probably was run off of a wood burning stove, an example. And when it's not cold out, it's hot out, and you open the windows. The most simple concept, right? But we've made things so complicated now and technical, and they don't need to be that way. And I think the level of technicality that we're sitting in front of, it's almost overload for our brain, versus let's simplify this, not dumb it down, simplify it. And I think that's going to have such an effect on our body's function, but our brain's response to it.
The massive thing you've just mentioned there, and we spoke about this a few weeks ago with Keith, is everything you just mentioned is free. You were talking about the
Mhm.
drugs that you can get put on in the beginning when you go to the doctor, and they cost so much money and all of that. Everything we've just talked about for the last 20 minutes is free.
Mhm.
Mm.
It is.
Everybody's got access to that.
Mm.
The simplicities of why read a book, read 10 pages out of a book. You have a really busy day today. You got 4,000 things going on. You have 6 kids running around. Why not read 5 pages out of a book, 10 pages out of a book? That's your meditation for the day, right? That's your education for the day. That's slowing your brain down and making you think a little bit more. It's making you critically think. That's free. Going outside, working out outside in your yard versus inside in some uncomfortable position, sitting at a desk where you're curled up and your posture sucks. Go outside and work. That's free. Growing a garden, I think it's really cool to see a lot more people growing their own vegetables and herbs again, or adopting chickens and getting back to simpler times. Those are all free, but it's also your body is again readjusting or reintroducing itself to survival skills and going back to being a survivor, right? You're literally just surviving in this short time of life that we live, and on this floating rock in the universe. Why not keep it simple and to habits that have always worked since the beginning of time. And whether it's we talk about more of your day in the routine, okay? Whether it's you go back to acupuncture and you do acupuncture because you're highly anxious or you're highly inflamed or you can't sleep at night, going back to simple practices that have been around since the beginning of time. And acupuncture is just an example. I say that, but and it doesn't have to be wildly expensive. It's not $4,800 a month. Yoga, doing some sort of flow. It doesn't have to be the practice of yoga, but it can be some form of flow that you do in your living room when your day is half over and you feel stiff and your brain feels foggy. Move around a little bit. Like that's something so simple you can do. All right, maybe you do a little workout in the afternoon with some friends. And what do you have in there? You have community efforts, okay, which is that social engagement that everybody needs. So referencing back to that TED Talk, there's 7 aspects of health, and one of them is social. And look at what the last 2 years has done to people. It's made them more recluse. They're staying in their homes. They are not getting enough vitamin D. They're not socializing. It's they're almost just staying in this hibernation mode when really humans need interaction. Even the most extreme introvert of all introverts needs that social interaction. So why not start to do social activities around health practices, like go ice bath with your friends. And it's hard as shit. You guys can laugh about it together. Or go in sauna together with your friends. You're getting community, you're getting stress response work in your body with hot and cold therapy. Or maybe you do a workout together that's grueling and terribly hard, but it's only 25 minutes and you're pushing yourself because you're with other people. Why? Because we can do hard things. And I think that we need to all challenge ourselves every single day. And when it comes to a workout, push yourself, and it's easier to do when you're with other people versus by yourself.
I saw a quote, I think earlier this week, you've mentioned Wim Hof a couple of times, but I think there was something that he said along the lines of, we've become so successful at making our lives comfortable that being too comfortable is now getting in the way of success, so we and like you said, we're too, and I read Primal Blueprint a couple of years ago. I think the Mark
Great
system.
book.
Yeah, fantastic. And then that led me down. I've been kind of carnivore since the 1st of April last year, so just over a year. And I'd probably say I'm 80 to 90%, for over 12 months now. And yeah, just these practices of doing things, I think to most people, because we talk to people every week on this podcast, we talk to people, within this world, and people, like yourself. But I do think the majority of the mainstream, certainly mainstream media, or people who consume mainstream media, hear some of these things and probably think they're totally bonkers and totally wacky and think, well, just go to your doctor and they'll give you the tablet and you just take the tablet and you just you watch your 4 hours of TV at night, and you go to bed, and you don't read books, and you don't, it's a different way of living. But I think it's getting back to that more. You've mentioned it a couple of times, that ancestral living or primal living, or more simpler times. I think most people are attracted to life like that when you use that language, and because everyone looks back at times that were a bit more simple. Even me, I'm in my 40s. You look back 30 years ago, life just was more simple. I'm sure it was. And 30 years before then, it was more simple. And 30 years before then, it was more simple. We've overcomplicated things, haven't we? I think
it's easy to get. I completely agree with you. It's easy to get caught up in the stress of the world today, or where time is at, how far we've come along, and how simple it is not, if you will. But I think it becomes a skill that everybody needs to really tap into, and that's, how do I shut this off? Step one, turn the stupid news off. And I'm sorry if I offend your listeners, but turn the news off. There's nothing we can do there's things that we can do, but there's a lot that we have zero control over. And all it does is heighten emotions. It heightens anxiety. It makes us fearful and in a constant state of stress. And when you're in a constant state of stress, your immune system is terribly malfunctioning. And so why put yourself in that position? You can control what you're in your immediate space of what you are doing and with whom. And I think that the more people that start to think that way, the more that's going to resonate. Humans are powerful beings. And when humans, pass on information, it's passing on forms of love, if you will. And that's, hey, teach your neighbor to go on a walk with you. Instead, turn the TV off and let's do something like this. It's simple and a little more old school, if you will. But we overcomplicated things so very much, and it doesn't need to be that way. And even look at just the stress of a TV or an electronic. Okay, if you're ending your day watching, and I apologize, I shouldn't tell you guys to stop watching the news. Do whatever you'd like. I suggest remove some of that stress from your life.
I've stopped watching EastEnders because that drives me insane. I get really anxious watching soap operas where they're shouting at each other.
Exactly. But even think about, like, okay, if we're looking at our roadmap of our day, right, our calendar, and okay, let's fast forward towards the end of the day. You've done a really intense workout. You did hard things. You challenged yourself. You had some community with your friends. You had some great, healthy conversation, maybe discussions. Maybe you disagreed on some things and you learned something new. Awesome. Those are all healthy habits. And then, okay, now you're going to wind down for the day. The sun's going down, your circadian rhythm, you want it to be in sync. So you watch the sunset, because that's going to have a big factor, or it's going to have a big impact on your circadian rhythm, where your retina is traveling to, how you're going to sleep that night, what your brain is doing and actually thinking. And instead, it's a common habit for us to, maybe we don't even notice that the sun's going down, or maybe we flip on the TV and now we're watching this flashing screen with so many unnatural lights flashing in our eyeballs. And it's a stress response you're now creating before you go to bed at night. So that's a big factor. The only time I really turn the TV on is if I either I want background noise, or B, what I found is when you're really stressed by something, I turn on the Earth shows or Animal Planet, whatever have you, because it has a calming but a very ancestral feel to it. And that to me is a better alternative if you're turning your TV on versus watching something highly stressful. That's just something that's
EastEnders, if you're Paul.
Yeah, fuck off.
What's that?
EastEnders, it's a terrible soap we have over here, which is like,
that's been on for 35 years.
It's a terrible, yeah. It's a
turn it on
British
at any point. There'll be someone screaming.
Yeah, what's going on?
I don't think I've seen it since.
I
don't think I've seen it since Dirty Den was in it.
Brit's
totally gonna watch
no
that.
idea what we're talking about.
Brit is laughing very politely. She's got no idea.
Basically, like the gritty East End of London basically everyone's screaming at each other. If someone's happy, it's only a moment, probably a couple of episodes away from their life going utterly tits up, and they'll end up in some kind of horrific kind of marriage issue. Something will happen to a kid. They'll be screaming at each other. Someone will suddenly develop a drug habit. It's just like, it's one of those kind of shows.
Do you know what?
Just a constant shitstorm.
I think I don't watch it, right? But I think it was on the other day, and Kathy was in it, and I was like, is she still in it? She was in like the original when it started, like nearly 40 years ago. It turns out she's married to she's been married to like about 5 different people. Like, honestly, everyone in the street, it's all in one street, and everyone has been with everyone else, and everyone's worked in the pub and in the laundrette and and it's weird. It's all the same. It's very weird.
Well, it's comforting.
Anyway, we're closing the door on EastEnders now.
I suppose. I mean,
you guys have put quite the sales pitch on this show, and I actually am going to find out. I'm going to watch it.
No, don't do it. Don't do it.
What you do is start on episode 1, which was in 1985.
Okay, I'll start on episode 1 and not skip ahead. I promise.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to keep you too long, Britt. There's one thing that I wanted to ask your opinion of, which is when someone has been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, there is something that also goes along with it, which is a bereavement and an anger. Because sometimes it is a very confusing time. And it would be quite easy, particularly someone who wasn't active like you as a teenager and as a child. So it's easy for you. You remember what it was like. You wanted to be this. And sometimes people have not got that active lifestyle before. And then when you start having to think, I've got to make these changes, I've got to live my life on more of a tightrope. Because what you have sometimes with an autoimmune disease is you have far less tolerance for the everyday thing. I could probably mainline chocolate, smoke and whatever, and I won't get any payback immediately. But sometimes if you have an autoimmune disease, very small tolerances, like you're talking about gluten, you're talking about sleep, stress and things like that, they can set you down into flare-ups and things like that. What would you say to someone who is probably going through some kind of bereavement for their own body, for their own life, and that loss of that freedom, and that suddenly having to control much more? Because it's almost like a 360 flip. You suddenly have to be very switched on to things that for the average person never has to think about. It's not to say they wouldn't eventually, but for most people, you can have a big, and you can have a late night, you can do all these things. You don't get any payback. Certainly not one that makes your life very challenging. What would you say around that?
I would say, first of all, you're not alone. When you have those mental lows, or I didn't grow up the way you did, or I didn't do this, or you feel that it's common, I think, for people to feel very alone when they have an autoimmune disease that's detrimental in the way that it can be. And so it's easy to get irritable because irritability is frustration. Irritability is another stress response. I know I keep saying that, but it's a means of, I don't even know what else to do. So I'm going to be very frustrated, or I'm going to be sad. I'm going to feel depressed, or I'm going to maybe not get out of bed because it hurts too much, and I'm just going to sleep. And that's one thing I would say doctors would always say is, you may just find you need a lot more sleep. Is it you need more sleep because you need to recover, or is it you're stay in bed because you're now in this mild level of depression because of what you're dealing with, what you're going through? You may feel helpless, all those things. Those are wildly common. And I think everybody who's had some form of an autoimmune disease has gone through them. I don't know if they talk about it enough. And I do highlight this with almost everybody that I work with is how are you really feeling? Like, what is your mental state? Don't compare yourself to the next person. Don't compare your childhood to someone else's childhood, because no one's life is the same. No one's life is identical. But what you can do is have a community of people that you can not only confide in, but you can talk and you can discuss and you can get your feelings and emotions out. Like, sit with those emotions and feelings because it's hard. It can be really hard, and it can rip you apart inside, like you wouldn't believe. And so the best thing you can do is A, remind yourself, I'm not alone, but B, you just got to start, because you can make the change. You can absolutely make the change. It'll be hard. And for some people, it's a quick fix and they're good and they feel like $1 million. For other people, it's a long road, but it's not it's not a road that's going to be decades upon decades upon decades of never finding a solution to the problem, and that problem being maybe pain that they're in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, without doubt. Yeah, that's.
And I think that people need to realize, don't give up hope. And I've gotten to places many times, like I've had to, just being fully vulnerable right now. I've been in so much pain where I've had to look myself in the mirror and in the morning and like sobbing my eyeballs out, saying, I can do this. Like I can do hard shit. Sorry, I'm going to try not to start crying, but I know what's like to be in that point of, you feel helpless and you feel like there's not, like, I don't know what else to do, because there's no doctor that'll give me an answer. They're just going to shove a pill down my throat, which doesn't work. And for me, it didn't work. You're going to feel alone, like there's no one else that understands it. So you got to find those people that get it, or they support you, or they'll assist you and help you. You're going to have those moments of low, but you need to have the people around you that bring you to a level or to a higher level, because you can't do it all by yourself every day. And I've tried to do it by myself a lot of days, and I was successful and persistent, but some days I was not successful. And it brings you into a level of depression. I've never been diagnosed with depression. I've never been on antidepressants or anything like that. And I don't want to be, but I know what it feels like to feel very, very low on some points, because you're in this extreme level of pain and you can't function like a normal human being can. So when you get to that bottom place, you can only go so low, and you're going to only go up from there. And so people have to realize that, and to not give up hope, and to see that there's so many solutions, and all those solutions, majority of them are free. And like you bounced back there before, Peter, I think you said these are all free options. They're all free resources. And it's what you put in your body every single day, how you wake up, what your mindset is. Maybe you pull from external sources to improve your mindset. You have friends and family that you confide in that understand. And the more support you have and the more mindset shift, the better response your body's going to have. And the more, or the easier it will be to fight through the really hard shit. Because it's not forever. You're not going to be in pain forever. You may have an autoimmune disease, maybe forever, or you may completely remove it from your system. But if you do have it forever, it doesn't have to be at the extreme level that you think it's going to be at forever.
And Britt, I was just going to ask Britt, you mentioned earlier, we spoke a little bit about your kind of training background and your specifically like your competition and competing background. And you said you got to a stage where you kind of drew a line on competition, in terms of sport. What does your kind of activity stroke, training exercise look like today? And is it much more intuitive now and dependent upon how you feel physically, or are you fairly stable at the moment physically so you can have a bit more structure, or how does, just for people who have got this kind of thing going on, is it better to have a more intuitive approach and not be too rigid and too structured with training?
I think you have to see where your body's at in that time, because I was always on a very structured regimen for a long time with my background, programs that whether I wrote for myself or I had a coach write it for me, or a coach simply coaching me. Those were always very helpful to have structure. I think structure is very important. Going about your day with structure is very, very important. And, but you have to be wildly intuitive alongside that structure, and know that you may kilter off of the plan a little bit here, because you are trying to adapt to the fact that maybe you can't walk very well today, or, maybe your your right ankle is so swollen to the point where you can't utilize it as well. So, okay, I'm going to adapt. I'm going to do a little bit more of, low intensity flow work today to get things moving. And then maybe I'm going to focus on some upper body intensive if I have it in me. So I think as time goes on, as we age, but what is age anyways, right? You have to be more aware and intuitive of exactly how your body feels and go off of that. So have a plan, but know it's okay to waver off the plan a little bit. So
you mentioned your discussions with doctors and things earlier, where you had kind of maybe raised this hypothesis that doing strength training would lead to more stability and more strength around joints and things, and might be good for your rheumatoid arthritis and things. Is strength training something that plays a part in your life now? And did you find that actually doing that helped your joints? Was that yeah?
Strength training, everybody should be doing it, in my opinion. I think it's one of the most beautiful things, and it's a gift that we are able to do, and everybody should do it. If you're not doing it yet, that's okay. Start. Find a coach that you trust, you guys, and start. Just absolutely start, because the impact and the benefits that you can gain from it are immense. It's incredible what it can do. And honestly, I think that was a saving grace for me when I was in my 20s, when I was or early 20s, when I was diagnosed. Was I got very diligent with strength training, with structure, moving heavy things. Our bodies are meant to move and extend and reach and push hard and exert. And there's a lot of modalities we can do that in, but one of the greatest ones is strength training. And especially for women, I think obviously we've come a long way for what women have done in the strength training world, and it's fantastic. But we need to be doing more of that. And as people are getting older, don't be afraid to push yourself, lift something heavier. And the benefits are going to be, the benefits are huge. So you gotta do it. And that was a big factor for me. That's why I feel so passionate about lifting heavy things. I like to move heavy things, and that's something that makes me feel better.
Excellent.
Yeah. So look, I mean, I think probably that's a great message to end on, is the fact is one of which, you have to go beyond these self-limiting things, whether those are internal or whether or not it's from other people who say what you can and can't do. I think it's inspirational. I mean, when I came across you and the help you provided for someone I know, you've kind of led the way in the potential and the ownership you can have over your own health. I think it's really inspirational, because there's a lot of people do amazing things. But I think to have the mental fortitude, to be able to communicate it, and to be able to give people that message of hope in a time when sometimes they don't always feel like they can do it. I think it's inspirational. I think it's great hearing your story, and I think it's going to be a great benefit to our listeners as well, to know that there is always something you can do. I think that's really powerful. So I have to thank you very much for telling your story.
Thank you for having me on. I think it's people have to all realize the potential that they hold within themselves and what they can truly do.
Yeah. So, I mean, is there anything that do you work with people online? Is there and how would people be able to get in touch with you and find out what you do? And do you work with people in a health capacity?
I do. I do in-person training, but I do a lot of online or virtual coaching. I just do virtual check-ins too. Some people just want a simple outline as far as strength, nutrition, lifestyle, and we'll check in, once a month, once every other week, depending on the person and their needs. And the best portal I send most people to right now is just my Instagram, which is pretty simple. Otherwise, direct email. I have someone actually working on my website for me right now, and that'll be up and running probably within a couple weeks. But for the time being, that's kind of the best contact point, even if it's just simple tips that they want to retrieve. Great. I help anyone and everyone on that aspect. So
what is your Instagram, Britt?
It's Britt Ringstrom BRITT, R as in Richard, INGSTROM.
I've just followed you, by the way.
Oh, perfect. I'm not as active on it as I should be. But yes, that's definitely kind of a source. That is, I'm not as active on Twitter. Facebook, I'm on as well, so people can reach me on Facebook, look me up on there. Again, I don't really post a whole lot on that, but I'm that or email, just my first and last name at gmail.com. Even if people want to reach out and just ask questions or pick my brain, I can pick their brain, all that fun stuff. I love being able to tap into more and more humans and just help them to better their lives overall.
Brilliant. So James, do you have anything you'd like to ask or leave listeners with?
No, just to say it was a really lovely conversation, Britt, and it was lovely to meet you. And I think that the whole a lot of what you spoke about, the kind of the ancestral living, the kind of the primal journey, the kind of carnivore-based stuff, a little bit more that kind of looking backwards, more simplified way of living really resonates with where I've been going over the last couple of years. And and it was a lovely conversation. I think a lot of our listeners will take a lot from it. And I think you gave some really practical kind of tips as well. It was a very uplifting and inspiring conversation, but there's also some real practical things that people can take, especially the stuff you were talking about in terms of forging a kind of slightly more proactive and mindful morning routine, and things like that. I think there's some really great stuff that people will be able to take away and use straight away. So thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, guys. I really appreciate it. And it's cool to talk to you guys from across the world. But I now will be listening to your podcast every day, for the record, or however often it comes on.
That's how you start the day. That's it. What about you, Peter?
Well, as per usual, the last 10 minutes that we've just been chatting has just opened up a whole load of other stuff. So I want to go for longer. But anyway,
maybe we should get Britt. We should get you on again. We'll get you on as a returning guest.
I would, in a heartbeat, do this again. So you guys let me know when. I've got plenty of stuff I can ramble on if you guys really want to listen, or we'll bounce ideas out. But there's two with watching this TV show.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But there's two things. I wrote something down nearly at the beginning because Britt said something. I can't remember what it specifically was you said. But then James said something about these ideas we've been talking about. People might think they're out there. They're a bit weird because the mainstream stuff is like watching the news and all of that, right? But you said something. I can't remember what it was, but it was one of the things you were talking about. And you said, "Well, but you wouldn't do that, of course." And it's of course in our world, of course that's true. But in the outer world, it's not necessarily true. So it's one of those things there's a bit of a disconnect, isn't there, with that sort of thing. And then the other thing you said, which is something that I listened to on the Huberman podcast, Andrew Huberman.
I love him.
About when you were talking about people are on, like, you'll be on your phone in the morning and then you drive to work and then you hit your screen. And then you drive home, and then you're in the gym on the treadmill watching something there, and then the telly's there, and everything's here. So you're closing your world down, and it's look off into the distance. Just go out for a walk and look into, like, if you can get somewhere where you can see no buildings around and stuff like that, and just look off into the distance. That's huge, because that's something that again is free, and it actually literally it opens up your body as well. Because if you open up your field of vision, you open up your body and you don't get as tight, so it helps joints and all of that.
He talks about looking at the horizon is a very strong tool. Yep.
Absolutely, yeah. And he said you can improve your mobility in the room just by looking as far as you can that way and as far as you can that way and as up and down, and then all of a sudden some tightness will go away somewhere. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm all over the whole doing the free stuff daily. Like,
yes,
and there's so much that you gave, so much value that you gave there that people might be even overwhelmed with that, even though it's all very easy to do, but it's not necessarily easy to incorporate. So just do the one thing that you can first, do that for a month, and then do the next thing and the next thing, and just layer it in.
Well,
that's all I can say to the listeners.
Well, our listeners should join the group, because if they have a question about perhaps what to implement into their life, you know, we can advise on us. So we've got a Health Oddity Facebook group, and
cool.
yeah, so you could join that.
Add me to it.
Yeah. So and if someone had a question, they could ask it in the group, and it would certainly help them there. So look, guys, I think we should wrap this up. But look, it's absolutely been amazing to have you on board, and thanks for sharing all your ideas and taking the time out of your day to meet with us. I know it's been early for you, but if anyone wants to check out Britt, please go to her Instagram and connect with her there and follow her account, and look out for the website when that launches. In the meantime, can you like and subscribe Health Oddity? And some of you may have had someone who's been affected by some of these things that we've been discussing today. So please do share this. We put this on YouTube, we put this on Spotify, the Facebook, and all the other podcast providers that are out there. So please do share us. And look, we'll see you next week. We've got great guests lined up for the rest of the year. We're always finding new people as well. So thanks for listening. We'll see you soon.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.